ladder time then. So we're nearly at the end of the series, we've just got a couple more episodes. To save time, what I've done is I've set up my middle frame with the mesh prefab and my end frame already set up for the episode, so we can pretty much get straight on with it. So the first thing we need to do is go to our temp player and set its ordering layer under sorting order to 2. Then go into the prefabs folder, click on the mesh, and you'll notice it says unknown layer. This is because I brought it in from a separate project. So just click on default, then open up the ladder prefab, choose ladder top to ladder bottom, stick those on the default layer of -1. Okay, and that's all the adjustments we need to make to the prefabs. So if you want to pause the video and go ahead and make yourself some a scene up with the ladder and the wire mesh, I will see you in a second. Okay, so if we go into scripts, this is a standalone module. It's not strictly a player module, but it's a player behaviour. We'll create a new C# script, and we call it Climbable Object. And once that's compiled, we'll open it up into Visual Studio. Okay, I'll get rid of the name spacing. And we start with our variables. Okay, let me zoom in a bit. We've got a float for climbing speed. We want a reference to a box collider and the platform effector, which are on the ladder. We've got a ball for, if this is a ladder, a ball to lock to ladder. This will lock your player to the middle of the ladder, and you won't be able to move at all when you're climbing up and down the ladder. You can just climb up and down, you won't be able to move left or right. We've got our usual references to the player controller script, collision script, animator and rigid body. And because this is a standalone module, the easiest way to communicate, because it's going to be enabled and disabled as the scene frames are enabled and disabled, is just to make this ball is climbing static. Not really a fan of doing it, but it's the simplest way we can do it. So we don't need the start function, we can replace that with an onEnable. So we want an onEnable and an onDisable function. So we can get rid of start and update because we don't need those. OnEnable, we're going to get the player controller. So this time we're doing game object, find object with tag player, and then we're going to get the player controller component. And then we're going to get the animator, but we're going to get it from the player controller. So we've got player controller get component and children, because the animator is a child of the player controller. Then to get the collision script, we're doing player controller dot get component collisions, and the rigid body the same, player controller get component rigid body. And on disable, we're going to null all of these references out, so it gets a clean set of references each time it's enabled. Okay, so now we need a fixed update method. So what we're going to do is we're going to check if we're climbing, and if we are climbing, we're going to run a climbing method. We need an Ontrigger, an Ontrigger Stay and an Ontrigger Exit method. So we'll start with the Ontrigger Stay. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the player by its tag. We're going to check if we're walking past or stopped at the bottom of the ladder to climb the ladder. So if we're walking or running past, we're going to set the animator speed to 1 and his climbing to false. or if we've stopped at the base of the ladder, we're going to set his climbing to true. And then if it's a ladder, we're going to disable the box colliders. If it's a mesh, these won't be attached. Or if it's a climbable wall or something like that, these won't be there, so we won't have his ladder tick, so these will be ignored. Okay, so that's the Ontrigger Stay. So if you want to pause and copy that out, I'll quickly jump up. There's the on enable and on disable. And there's the variables. Okay, let's get on with the Ontrigger Exit. Okay, so what we're going to do is, again, we're going to get the player tag. We're going to set his climbing to false, set the animator speed to 1. If it's a ladder, we're going to re-enable the box collider and platform effector. And if we've locked the ladder, we're just going to freeze the rotation. Okay, so now it's time for the climbing method. So let's just jump down into the user methods. Okay, so we're going to start off by having if is climbing, if else statement. So we're going to have if climbing. We're going to check to see if it's a ladder, and if it's a ladder, we're going to just get input on the y-axis only. We're going to set the animator speed to 1, and if there's no input on the y-axis in the up and down direction, we're going to set the animator speed to 0. And then we've got, in the else statement, we're just going to reset the gravity. Okay, we've got an else statement to go below this if statement. Okay, so what we're going to do is, if it's not a ladder, we're going to get control on the X and the Y stick, and then set the animator speed to 1 or 0. Okay, then we want to come down a bit, and we've got another one to disable our player and move him if it's locked in the ladder position. So if lock to ladder's set, then we'll transform the player to the middle of the ladder, and then we'll freeze the rigid body on that X position, and we'll freeze the rotation. Finally, then we just need to move the player up and down the ladder. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to set the RB velocity to a new vector 2, whatever the X velocity is, and then we're just going to use player controller.y times climbing speed, and we're going to set the gravity to 0. That's all we need for the Climbable Object script. So there's the first if statement, and that is climbing if statement. That was a tongue twister. There's the lock to ladder and the move player code, and then that's the final else statement. Okay, so you can now save that. We need to go into the player controller, into the check movement function, and then we're just going to check if we're climbing. We're going to reset the double jump ball, and that is jumping ball. Okay, so below the col is grounded. Have I spelt climbable object? Yeah, I've spelt it wrong. But we're going to put if climbable object is climbing, is jumping is false, and double jumped is false. There's always something every episode. Climbable object. Let's rename that. Copy that because I need to rename the script. Oh, I'll rename that anyway. So that should have got rid of that error. So we can save the player controller. jump into the animator, copy climbing, jump down to the animation place states switch statement and paste climbing into there, and then we just need to add a new if statement to check if we're climbing to play that state. So we'll just get that now. Okay, so that's just if climbable object is climbing, then we're going to change this animation state to climbing. So we can now save all them, go back into Unity, hook this first script up to our ladder, but we've got one more script that we've got to create. But before we do that, I'm going to wrap this episode up because it's getting a little bit long, so I'll create the second part now. So don't forget, give this video a thumbs up and hit a like. Don't forget to subscribe, and hopefully I'll see you in my Discord channel. Right, I will see you in part B.